Perfect. Thanks everybody for coming to the last session on Friday. I appreciate it. I learned a valuable lesson last night. We were bar hopping, and you go to a bar. It's 1:30 in the morning, and I'm standing sober. I'm trying to get ready for today. I'm standing at the entryway. A girl comes in, and she hands me her ID. We check it, and we go ahead. Looks good to me. You know, if you look the part, you know, people believe you. That was my lesson. So I carded about 20 people last week. There's a video of it. Apparently, I'm getting the signal. But there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, you know, you get up and you present something, and you have a particular look. I look like a guy who wasn't drinking and completely stupid. But in any event, it was a fun night. Presenting your CV case. I'm going to give you a sample of a case that I worked on with Ed. I worked on with Gary Bauman, who was here a few minutes ago. Rodney, the mediator of Matrix Mediation, had mentioned this case earlier. We mediate cases, you know, numbers are all over the place. I always say 95% is my number of the cases that are filed settled. And so, I call myself a litigator for many years, but the reality was I really didn't litigate cases. I mediated cases. I was some type of a, you know, hybrid where I wanted to go to trial, but I took mediation very seriously. And I thought, you know, if we're going to mediate the case, I've got to present the case. And the trick is, and this is really the hard part, my little French here, this is the original quote from the 1600s. It's true then, it's true now. I love this quote. Just heard it the other day. And there's a lot of truth to that. It takes a lot of effort to take a lot of information, thousands of bits of data, hundreds of thousands, and reduce it down to something that people can understand. Gary Bauman just walked in. I will paraphrase his quote. He tries a lot of cases, and he goes, Jim, trial's about reduction. How do you reduce the information so that you can inject it into the mind of the trier of fact? And so what I like to think of what this process is similar to a movie where you are involved in developing a 90-minute story, and it's hundreds or thousands, perhaps even 100,000 man-hours to develop that 90-minute story. In a mediation, you don't want to bore people. You've got 30 minutes. I try to limit my talks to about 30, 45 minutes or so. And I want to give people the information they care about. So here's our condo project. It's up in the Jacksonville area. It's 15 buildings, 300 units. And the first thing that I did is I took that all the buildings and I made scale models and color-coded them so that we had a phase matrix. Everybody can understand the phasing. I could turn that into a timeline, a color-coded timeline. Very important because the audience includes insurance carriers, and the insurance carriers are looking for time on the risk. So that's what they want to see. And I always get the same question, Jim, could you go back to that slide? I want to see when the occupancy was, and they want to know when their policy is triggered so they can make a decision. So I'm anticipating with a simple graphic that will serve multiple purposes that information. And then you can look at the different unit types. It's not important, but if we wanted to, say, blow up and look at, you know, how many type 100 units there are, that type of thing, we could talk about those, if that's important to the discussion. Ed talked about the 80-20 rule. It's something that I've been focused on for a long, long time. It basically says 80% of your information, the dollar value of your case, the damage in the case, are in 20% of the issues. It's always put that way. In sales, it's 80% of your clients, 80% of your revenue is 20% of your clients. And cases are like that. And I always look to figure out a way to get that 70 or 80% of the issues because people need to focus on what the drivers of the case is. And so in this particular instance, it was the building envelope. That was 80%, and then roughly 20% were other issues. So I spend 80% of my time talking about the important things. And the other thing that I do is I force all my data into 3 categories. Like some people call it the rule of threes. I learned that 25 years ago when I started my law practice.
was something that really stuck with me. People don't want to hear lists of 10 things. They can't process it. If you keep it simple and you talk about 3 issues, people get it. And so these are all the damages. The issue in the case was, there were 2 issues. What are the real damages? What are the real dollars? And I deconstructed that through a very sophisticated spreadsheet analysis, but I reduced it down to 3 groups, and I just called them Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, and building envelope was Group 1. And up at the top, plaintiff expert, he said the stucco is going to be $6 million, and our share, we only had 240 out of the 300 units, was $5 million. And that was a very important point that I had to make to plaintiff's counsel, because he had fixated on this $14 million number. It was burdened with interest. It was burdened with it's all kind of burden. But it was really not a $14 million case. It was really a $5 million case. And perhaps less as you analyzed it a little bit more, because if you looked at it to a little bit more detail, his own contractor, and this was somewhat of a hidden document, had estimated the repair different than the plaintiff's expert of $3.4 million. So I got people to focus on an issue of the plaintiff's numbers, their damages, and so we worked off of this number when we were in mediation, and there were multiple mediation sessions. I'm going to go through all the details. This is a plaintiff graphic that I highlighted in the mediation, and I said, you know, the plaintiff has painted this project with an extremely broad brush. Anywhere there was a leak detected in any one of the buildings, he colored it purple. And so the question that no one really could answer up until the time of this mediation was whether or not we had a systemic problem. Because when you color everything in a particular color and you say those are the buildings that are experiencing water intrusion, the assumption is that you have this systemic problem. And that was an assumption that was advanced by the plaintiff's counsel. And this was a case, I don't want to say it's typical, but this case was a giant smoke screen. It was hundreds of thousands of documents. When Ed brought me in, we had 32 CD-ROMs that we had to digest and review. And out of that 32 CD-ROMs, there was no water testing that had been performed. All we had was homeowner complaints. I took the data and I looked at the homeowner complaints, 500 pages. I looked at the plaintiff's spreadsheets, no testing. I went through all the different types of complaints. These were the lists: window flashing, window condensation, wall leaks, all these things. And that data had to be processed. But at the end of the day, it was a simple question: did we have a systemic issue? In order to simplify the case, and again, this was an issue that I had with respect to carriers, because some carriers had some contractors with some phases. I broke the project up into a very simple graphic. Again, we're doing the threes. We have 3 phases. And then I did something, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this, because I'm going to back up. This is a plan view, right? We're looking down from the top, and we're looking at the layout of all the buildings, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, going from right to left. And now I took those same buildings, and I wanted to have a graphic. Some people call these infographics because they're high density, there's a lot of information, but they're simple also at the same time. You can see a lot and spend a lot of time on it. But this, I'm going to give you an example. This is a building here, and it's a 2-story. If you look up at the first floor, that's building 1, unit 101, 102, 103, and we go left to right. And the second floor is 101, 201, 202, 203. So here's a graphic that has, my contractor had 240 out of the 300 units. So I had one master graphic that I created that I could use for multiple purposes and show leaks, roof leaks, window leaks, whatever it was, and I could show every unit and what that issue was. And I spent a lot of time on this in the mediation, and I asked a simple question. I did a takeoff. I went through every unit, and I figured out how many windows there were for the 240 units, and it turned out to be there's 560 windows. And so I created this, and this is 560 empty boxes. And so I challenged everybody to think about this case, because the plaintiff says we've got to re-stucco all these buildings. The buildings are failing. And we had no numbers to support it, just extrapolation from some very minimal testing. Forcing. And this was the graphic, my main graphic that I spent all the time with, and I said, I know it's hard to read, but we're going to spend a lot of time on it, and we're going to walk you through. And I've got a key that shows units that had mold, units that had single leaks, multiple leaks. There were some references to a leak or a water source that was vague, and we didn't know if it was a window leak or not. And I charted all that. And so you could see through the color coding where the leaks were, what type of leaks they were, whether they were multiple leaks, whether you had testing done, saw cuts. I had a little saw there, little chop saw, not chop saw. Skill saw, thank you. You know, to show, so this is the way I like to take my own notes. I like to graph out cases so I can understand them on a page or two. So if I had nothing else to take with me and I wanted to take one sheet of paper, this would be the piece of paper that I would take, because it would tell me where the tests were and what the performance of the system, of the units were. I'll cut to the chase. Oh, by the way, so once I created that master graphic, I could use it for other types of reported leaks. They were saying that all the balconies had to be replaced. There were 2 balcony leaks that were reported in the whole project. Roof leaks, only 12 out of 240. They had taken core samples out of the wall, and all of the core samples for our buildings were dry. In other words, they were claiming that the OSB needed to be replaced, and it turned out that they were all dry. Gary reminded me of this graphic. It's very interesting because when I showed this in mediation, they had originally claimed that I fabricated this document, and we showed them that the base number came from their repository. And that's how powerful that graphic was. So again, I went through the whole process. I asked a simple question at the beginning. Sometimes simple questions are tough to answer, but at the end of the day, the point was made earlier by Ted, you know, it's really simple. It's not rocket science. Is this problem systemic? And this is the answer. This is the answer to that simple question. We had 4 units, and I assumed 3 windows per unit, that had confirmed leaks, that confirmed multiple leaks, 11 that had single leaks, and 8 units that had some reference to a leak or water intrusion of some type that you didn't know if it was window condensation or a leak from a plumbing line. That was the whole case. That was the plaintiff's case. And I presented this to the plaintiffs. And so I answered 2 important questions in a very short period of time. Question number 1 is, what are your real damages? It's not $14 million. It's closer to 4. And do we have a systemic problem? And I gave this presentation to not only the plaintiffs' counsel, but importantly, the audience that I cared about were the homeowner association representatives, the retired couples who were there on the board to make decisions. It took, I don't know how many sessions, I think probably 4 or 5 sessions, 40, 50 people at a time. We settled this case at, on day 5 or 6 at literally 3 in the morning. We were weary-eyed, but we pushed through and settled the case. I had a sister case to this in January, another case, same plaintiff's attorney, very, very similar. And I got some feedback, some positive feedback. My presentation was very helpful because I used this presentation. The nice thing of having a presentation like this that I just gave in whatever 10 or so minutes is that you can take it on the road with you. You can sit down with a plaster subcontractor. You can sit down with an adjuster. While I was in Jacksonville and I got online and went and did a go-to meeting, a little webinar, and I spent a half an hour on the phone with her, giving her the same presentation that I just given to 40 people. So when you have information that's compact and succinct and simple, direct, it's very useful not only to communicate your ideas, but also to challenge people in the audience. I always say the same thing at every mediation. I don't have all the information. I'm not the expert. You're the people who built the project. You know it better than me. And if I'm wrong, tell me, because that adjusts everyone's risk assessment of the case. I would say 9 times out of 10, probably more, I don't get challenged. And when I don't get challenged, I know that I've delivered information that's objective, simple, correct. That's it.